APEX stands for Achieving Performance Excellence. So it's really what it stands for. We are hoping that this new change will propel all of us to a new height of excellence. And that's what APEX is for. It refers to the new framework itself and also the new system that's coming on board. So in the future, you're not going to talk about WFI or EPMP. Have you done your APEX? Have you learned about the APEX system? What are you going to do about APEX? So let's learn a new language, the APEX way. So what is this APEX way? There are at least 3 things I would like to share with you. First, there is actually the OCBC transformation that's ongoing. We all know about the digital transformation that is coming fast and furious. We know about all the competitors that's out there in the landscape. We need to up our game. What will be the future competencies that we all need to have? We need to define them and align that to every single employee in the OCBC group. That's our number 1 key priority. Number 2, we are experiencing the changing nature of work. It's more and more dynamic, it's project-based, it's collaboration all over the world. We need a system that is flexible enough to facilitate that kind of work. And the employee expectations has been going up. We would like to have more feedback. The millennials have been asking us, can we have more feedback from the managers? Can we be enlightened exactly what is your promotion criteria? We would like to have more dialogue. Managers also would like to have more coaching opportunities with the staff. And finally, we do hear more of our staff appealing for more transparency and clarity in how we execute our performance methodology. And certainly, we want to have a balanced approach in our performance assessment process, balancing between the short-term and the long-term, balancing between the financial and the non-financial aspect. That brings us thinking, how should we go about revamping our performance assessment framework? And that leads us to APEX. And let me introduce to you the vision of it all. It's really to unlock possibilities, create value, and build our future together. We want to unlock the possibilities of every individual, unlock the possibilities of the organization, create value for one another, for yourself as an individual, create value for the other person as a manager, and create value as a whole. Only will we achieve this if we can do this together. And that's so important. Let me illustrate to you how they work. Now, a little mascot here, APEX. And this is how it summarizes together everything in one simple diagram. At the start, we want to help you set your aspirations according to 6 balanced scorecard categories. That allows you to frame very clearly what are the key areas that you need to take charge of. That's really the cognitive aspect. Well, that's not all. There's the other aspect about your leadership capacity. How are you growing as an individual? The competency that needs to come alive. And there, we give you the 7 leadership competency areas that really covers your conviction, your hands, how you reach out to others. Not only do we want to emphasize on the head knowledge, on your cognitive and very clear goals and your leadership competencies, it's also very important for a person to be anchored in our values. And that's where we have the 5 core values, LIFER, that really sum up the entire APEX framework. And this is what we have for you today, and this is what we're going to discuss a lot more. How does it play out? Besides the new framework, the whole process is going to be more continuous development. Besides the static process that we have experienced perhaps in the past, where it's really just at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, 2 static points of discussion, we want the dialogue to be more continuous, to be more dynamic. We want feedback to happen all the time. We want people to be open to sharing ideas with one another. For that reason, we are encouraging managers to really taking up a more proactive role to provide timely and constructive feedback. Coach employees in their career development, provide an empowering working environment. This is really the new shout out to the managers. Employees, you have your responsibility as well. You need to take ownership of your personal, professional development. We are calling for everyone to really take charge of their own career compass. Seek continuous feedback and development opportunities for growth. Raise requests if you need for any necessary support so that you can move forward together as one. Ultimately, what we are aiming for is that as an individual, we will be able to sustain high performance for you and help you have a continuous career development in OCBC Group. As we add up as individuals, as an organization, we will be able to have clarity of our strategic focus, where we are going as a unit, as an entity, as a group, and be able to channel our resources in building future-ready capabilities. That's really what we are all aiming for, from the individual right down to the whole organization. So that's really the summation of how it looks like from the APEX framework perspective. I'm going to take some time to walk through with you each of those components. First, setting targets for growth. Well, Charles Koch once said this: to do meaningful work is to contribute, to create value in society. Such wisdom. In other words, before we set our targets, it's important to ask ourselves, are we creating value? Are we creating value in the things that we do? What does that target seek to serve? Does it build the community? Does it build value in somebody else? Does it amount to anything that is actually substantial? So for that reason, we have a very rigorous process of setting our KPIs. There's the bottom-up initiatives where we encourage ideas to bubble up from the bottom. Feel free to encourage good ideas to suggest to your managers. That might just change the world from that one simple idea that you have. At the same time, management also take pains to go through what is on the horizon and give us a top-down guidance on what needs to be focused on. And through that process, we begin to align our KPIs to actually fight as one team. And that's how the whole process of setting KPIs actually works. And these goals are actually not static. We all know that business environment change, and these goals will continue to evolve and be changed dynamically throughout the entire year. And that's supposed to be so. It should be no surprise that whatever you have set at the beginning of the year could very much change when you are nearer the end of the year. And that's what we want to see as well. To help you categorize the KPIs properly, as I shared earlier, there are actually 6 KPI categories that we have set out. Actually, there's 5 plus 1. So there's financials, there's risk and control, there's customer, there's product, there's human capital, and there's a catch-all if there's something else that you're doing, that's the others category. So there's really 6 buckets to help us channel our resources to where are the key areas that we want to focus on. This also helps us to always focus on the things that you might have missed out. If you are over-focusing on the financial goals, are you missing out on the risk and control? If you're only focusing on some of the aspects, what about the new pipeline of talents that you need to build? So that really allows us as an organization to be aligned as one. And there's actually a very simple way to go about setting the specific goals. I think we're all very familiar with the SMART methodology. SMART really refers to being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. In other words, it's asking you, what exactly do you want to do? Can you articulate that in a very simple language? Is it measurable? How would you know when you have achieved it? Is it in your power to accomplish it so that it's realistic? Is it aligned to the overall business focus so that it's relevant and not doing something that's out in sync or what the rest are doing? And finally, when exactly do you want to accomplish it so that it's actually within a certain timeline? That actually allows us to set the KPIs as an individual, for others, and the organization. But that's not all. Leadership competencies is the next thing that's important. And I'm actually inspired by Carly Florina that says the highest calling of leadership is to unlock the potential of others. Indeed, leadership is such an important thing. We need to unlock the potential of ourselves, we need to unlock the potential of others, and the leadership capacity as a whole. For that reason, we are very rigorous in defining the leadership capacity that we need to have. We set out to define at least 3 leadership pillars. We call them self-leadership, the first pillar, the people leadership, and the business leadership. The self-leadership really refers to the necessity to lead yourself as an individual. Next comes the all-important people aspect. How are we interacting with other people? And finally, the business leadership, the business acumen, the aspect where you need to actually know how the organization is run. Breaking that down, there are 7 competencies that we have bucketed under these 3 pillars. The first one, leading courageously. Dare to make the right decisions. Dare to take the initiative. Go where nobody has gone. Be adaptable. Adaptability becomes very important. People leadership. building talent, not just when you are a manager, even as an individual contributor. Do you have an eye for strengths and weaknesses? Do you have an eye for the people who are gifted differently? Fostering collaboration, not just within, but internally across the entire organization, interdivision collaboration as well. Business leadership talk about risk awareness, customer experience, and strategic thinking. Understanding what are the connecting dots between one to the other. Knowing that the customer today desire a certain experience that's just beyond service as only. Not only just on time, but knowing what are the latent desire and needs of a customer. Besides defining what these 7 competencies are about, we further go on and define 4 leadership levels to clearly define how one should mature along the way. And level 1 is about leading yourself. How do you exhibit self-mastery of mindset, behaviors, and skills? At the very minimum, you should be able to lead yourself. By the way, our definition is that everyone is a leader. You are a leader in your own right. You are a leader when you're an individual contributor. You are a leader when you're leading a team, whether formal or informal. We all start from there. Level 2, as you progress further, you are now leading peers. Those peers could be your former team members, could be just informal project groups. This is where you start to exhibit expertise in your area of work. And you start to build your sphere of influence as a peer leader or a first-level manager. As you go up the level, you are now leading teams. These teams, again, can be formal teams, cross-functional teams, project teams, informal teams. You start to lead key projects, navigate the teams, and coaches your team members on performance. Finally, at the pinnacle, you are leading the organization. This is where it requires you to really create the vision and strategy, institutionalizes the policy and practices, catalyze change, and inspires people to move forward. Those are the 4 levels. So now you might ask, we have the 7 competencies, we have the 4 levels. How do we go about knowing whether anybody have those levels? This is where we go and define what we call leadership behaviors descriptors. We define exactly what do we mean when somebody have level 1 leading courageously, so that we have the same understanding and expectations. What about somebody who have level 3 in customer experience? What does that look like? Those are being described in the form of leadership behavior statements. I'm going to show you some example of what it looks like. This is an example at the level 1 leadership competency. So for level 1 leading self, when somebody is leading courageously, we are looking out for this at least. You need to take initiative to embrace challenging tasks. So we are very specific in what leading courageously mean at that level. On the other end, for strategic thinking, you might be thinking, wow, I'm not really a leader charting out the strategies. Does it apply to me? Yes. Strategic thinking at level 1 means that you must be able to draw linkages from events and identify impact to your own area of work. So again, we are building the scaffolding to let you grow through the various levels, beginning with level 1. So now you might be curious, how does it grow through the various levels? So let me show you an example through one particular competency called adaptability. Adaptability at level 1 means that you need to be receptive to change, adjust to new or changing assignments, processes, people, and opinions. As you progress, when you go up to level 2, this is where you need to go beyond that and start to identify and consider alternative approaches to situations or problems. As you start to lead formal teams, you need to lead your team in adapting quickly to changing situations. Finally, when you're at the pinnacle level, we are expecting you to anticipate the market trends and prepare the organization for them. So there you can see how the maturity works as you go down the various leadership level. And that's the same for the rest of the other 6 leadership competencies. So this is really a tool that we developed to help everybody understand how you can develop as an individual, to help managers to assess their staff, and help managers to know how to develop their people further. So for example, if you are trying to develop somebody as a level 3, perhaps you need to give that person an opportunity to lead team in tricky situations so that he knows how to lead them to adapt quickly. So that's where we have a very definitive language over there. And for that reason, we actually want to encourage managers to contextualize and customize the expectations. And this is an example of how it might look like. So for example, for AVP4, but you're in a customer-facing role. So the manager might decide, well, I think this particular person or staff of mine should have level 3 for customer experience, fostering collaboration on the ground, and really leading courageously on fraud cases. So this is where I want to set level 3 for this particular staff. And for the rest, I might decide I want to set a level 2 for adaptability, building talent, risk awareness, and strategic thinking. And that's just one for one particular person, and it can be different for others. So this is how you would use a tool and contextualize them. Well, on the other hand, if you are in a support function role as an AVP4 in the same rank, you can see that it can actually change altogether. For this green color line, perhaps this person is from a risk function. I now want to let this person be at a level 3 competency for risk awareness. And maybe for strategic thinking, I want to set this person at level 3. And the rest, some of them, I want to set at level 2. So that's where you actually contextualize them. This becomes very important because you are articulating your expectation to the individual. What do you want that person to be at? Before you rate this person at the end of the year, whether he has exceeded that expectation or not. So that's what this leadership competency level is all about. So now we come to the last part of the component, the OCBC core values. That really is also inspired by Henry Ford. He said that coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. In other words, there needs to be something that binds all of us together as we actually work on our own individual pursuit. The greatest success belongs to a team that can be anchored on the same values, on the same vision. And that becomes very important in our OCBC LIFR values. That really keep us anchored down in all the things that we do. The LIFR values really help us to evaluate our choices on a daily basis and also help us to make wise decisions. By now, you should be quite familiar, but without harm, let me also go through the 5. We have lasting value, integrity, forward-looking, responsibility, and respect. These 5 really speaks of the core DNA of an OCBC staff. No matter how good you have exceeded your target, no matter how capable you are as a leader in terms of your skill set, the core values is one that defines our cultural heritage. It is something that we actually measure whether this person goes a longer way than others. So this is actually an important component of our performance assessment process. Now, I've introduced to you the 3 components of performance assessment framework, so-called APEX. How do we take stock of our progress? How do we know that we are progressing on all these fronts? Let me give you the mathematics now. First, as you embark on this journey, you should begin to be taking on your own initiative various feedback from your counterparts. Be proactive to get feedback from manager, from stakeholders, from your subordinates, from your peers, from your project teammates, from anybody that can value add to your growth. Be thick skin to ask them, how am I doing? Is there anything that I can actually do more or do less? So that is the first part of the feedback that you should be taking stock of. Now come the quantitative aspect. This is how we break it down for you. For the first part, in terms of the key performance indicator, it really measures on what exactly did you achieve. The what constitute 50%. So it's equally important to how did you achieve it. In terms of measuring how did you achieve it, we will ascribe 25% to leadership competency capability and another 25% to your core value rating. So this together gives us the overall 100%, which we'll call the overall performance rating. So in the future, it's no longer PCPO. Again, it's a new language. What is your KPI rating? What is your LCR rating? What's your CVR rating? And what is your OPR rating? So it's got to be 4 ratings that you need to be familiar with going forward. So this is really the breakdown of the weightages. So for now, we're going to have a very standardized numbers to describe the emphasis on each part of it. We are also breaking down in terms of the KPI weightages. So to calculate, first of all, the KPI rating, we first give the weightages to each of the 6 categories. This is going to be a conversation that you need to have with your managers. If you are in a more customer-facing role, obviously you're going to have a higher weightage on financial category. If you're in a support function, the risk control and other aspects might go up. So this is an illustration of how that might look like for a particular person, where 50% of the weightage is on financial and the rest are 10%, adding up to 100%. But take note that you do not have to necessarily fulfill all 6 categories. If somehow your role do not have all 6 categories, you can actually cluster them around those that are more relevant. And you can actually set unlimited number of sub-KPI within each category. But you are not allowed to design or create a new 7th category. So for all the KPIs that you are going to have or create, you will create them within these 6 clusters and or buckets. Then on top of that, we are going to give rating to each of the category, rather than giving an overall rating, which you might be more familiar with the current PO rating, which is on an overall basis. We are first giving, if you like, an individual PO for each of the category score. So that's what is going to be happening for the KPI rating. And the rating scale that we're using is a 5-point rating scale that we have been using all along. It extends from significantly below expectations at rating number 1 all the way to 5, where you are significantly exceeds expectations. And this is how the math works. With the weightage and the rating, you are going to have a weighted average rating computed for each particular KPI. The first row will be read as such. 0.5 times 2 will give you 1. So it's the same reasoning for the rest. As you sum them up on the rightmost column, this will give you the weighted average rating of 2.7. So this is something you need to take note. Now you see the importance of the weightages. It will also influence the final score of yours and not simply a simple average mean. So this is how it works for the computation of the KPI rating. Now for the leadership competency rating, we are also going to use the same 5-point rating scale. It will be also rated on an individual competency perspective rather than the current overall PC that you might be more familiar with. So again, you can understand it by we are going to give an individual PC for each of the category before calculating an average score for your LCR. So in this example, it's really just adding 3 plus 3 plus 3 all the way to the end and divide by 7. And that's where you get 3.3. So that's your second rating, LCR. Now we have the final last rating. The core values rating is using a different scale. It's using a 4-point rating scale, which reads like this. At level 1, rating 1, you practice the value occasionally as expected of the job role. So it's going to be contextualized what is the expectations of your job role. Finally, as you go up the ladder, the next is you are practicing the value in most but not all occasions. So roughly there, but still not so consistent. At the third stage, you are practicing the value consistently. Finally, you are level 4, we're expecting you to go beyond your individual accountability to help others achieve their core values behaviors. That's where you start to champion the value. So the core values is assessed on a 4-point rating scale. Similarly, you're going to use this rating scale to assess each of your core value one by one before deriving the average rating CVR. So again, the example here is 3 plus 3 all the way divided by 5. That's where you get 3.2. So that's the core values rating, the third rating. Now let's put everything all together. So now that we have the KPI scoring, let's say for argument's sake 2.7 out of a 5-point scale, and then we have the LCR, which is 3.3 out of a 5-point scale, followed by the CVR, which is 3.2 out of 4.0. And then finally, you have the OPR, which is the 100% scoring, 3.2 out of 5. Why is it 3.2 out of 5 when the core values rating is our 4-point scale? Some of you might be asking. So this is where we apply a normalization factor. Right, the core values rating being a 4-point scale has its purpose because in the odd number scale, that typically allows people to hide in the middle number. So we need to reconcile it back end. So how we do that is that for the core values rating CVR, we are going to apply a normalization factor of 1.25 to get it back to a 5-point scale. So that when we add them up, you will be consistent. And in this example, the final overall OPR is 3.2. So that's your score finally as an individual. So this is how the whole APEX framework will work. Just summarizing once again, really the whole APEX framework, always remember that the emphasis is all about trying to unlock the possibilities of an individual, create value, and building our future together. If you do not remember everything, remember at least this visual. It's really about unlocking a person in terms of that diagram there. As you go forward, you have made various career pathways in front of you. There are various possibilities that you can go forward. Have conversation with your managers to know what does it take to go to the various paths. And ultimately, as you see the front, when there's a vision in front of you, that's where we are trying to build an OCBC future together. And there's so many futures that we can build. And that's really the ultimate vision for us all.